It's
Hello.
Amanda.
Good evening,
And
Rick.
this is Rick,
Hello.
in case you don't know. Of course, it says live with Rick and Amanda, so
Welcome
if I'm
to
Amanda,
the
you must be Rick.
Fundamental Faith YouTube channel Q&A.
Wow. Okay, so we are live this week. We haven't been live for a couple of weeks, I don't think, because we were
Since before
traveling.
you left.
And last Thursday I was sick, so it's been a little while, but we
2
are
weeks.
back.
Yep.
And we are going to try to answer the questions that we have been asked.
Yeah.
And hope you guys will hang out with us and maybe get some questions answered. I don't know. We didn't get any questions asked today.
Yeah.
Hey everybody. And I need to turn this down. But we had a question that had been asked of us.
A question.
A question that was asked of us previously before we traveled, and so we hadn't had a chance to get to it yet, so we are going to address that question tonight. Maybe we'll have time for a few others. We're going to try to keep it around an hour tonight. We'll see how that goes. It almost never works out that way. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and share the link really fast. Do you want to tell them the topic, what we're going to be talking about, while I share this link real fast?
Sure. Let me see. It was a couple weeks ago when we did our last live event. I asked if there were any cues for questions for the Q&A, and I think I got several comments, and we got to them. But the one that we did not get to, somebody asked advice for single folks. So that's where we're going to start tonight. But listen, if somebody's jumping on and you have something you'd like to talk about too, you can jump in there and bring up another topic. But we just need a place to start. So we're talking about singles. And if you're single, then this is for you. And if you're not, maybe you know somebody who is. Maybe you have some kids that are growing up. One day you can help them with advice. You know, we have a couple grown men in our house that are right around that.
Where there are several singles here.
Yeah, they're all these things apply to them, so it can apply to all kinds of folks. So that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I know somebody first asked us the topic, I immediately thought of it in terms of us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was like, well, we're not really single, so I don't really know what to say. But then the more I thought about it in terms of the kids, how we are not single.
Yeah.
But we got a lot of singles around us.
Yeah. Or in all honesty, maybe you go to a church that has a lot of single folks in it.
That's true.
Mean, our church right now has
a lot
adults, grown-ups who are single, who some of them are widows, some of them have never been married. Actually, every church that I've ever belonged to has had folks like that, grown folks who are single. So.
And there's a wide variety. I mean, single covers so many different layers. I mean, I have a good friend that I've mentioned before that her husband passed away a few years ago, and she's single. And there's just a lot of reasons why anybody could be single. And I'm just gonna
you're fine.
Share this
Take
other
your time.
link.
We're all just waiting patiently.
Sorry,
do you have your coffee or your tea or your water or your something or other?
All right, I'm just about done here. Let me just post this one.
Your pop, your Snapple.
Oh my word! Snapple. I don't know who bought it. Oh, Ricky bought a Snapple.
Yeah, Ricky brought a Snapple.
I was like, that was an odd one. It's just an odd thing to come up. Okay, so Rick and I were talking about it, and I think the first we this is pre-talked about. He told me to read all this, so we were talking about what verses came to mind when we were talking about singleness, and of course the first ones that came to mind was Paul when he was talking about the value of singleness. So I'm going to read some verses from 1 Corinthians 7 while he drinks his coffee
Get your
and
Bible.
Wakes himself up. And so just a few. I'm not going to read the whole chapter because the whole chapter really talks about a lot of different details.
You're going to jump around, hit some highlights.
Yep, I'm just going to do a few at a time. So, but 1 Corinthians 7 is a good place to start if you are single or you know someone who's single and you want to help them. So 1 Corinthians 7, verses 1 to 2.
Start reading.
Okay. It says, now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me. So apparently they asked this question. This has been an ongoing question, right? It is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. So he starts it out by saying, you've asked me about this, so it's really fine for a man not to, be touching all the ladies. But, to avoid trouble, every man should have his own wife and every woman her own husband. Good place to start there. So the goal, and I always, we have single kids in our house, and there may be one in my household who might have said that he would prefer to remain single. And me being mom and Rick being dad, our first verse that came to mind was, it's not good for man to live alone.
Right.
That was in Genesis. That's right at the beginning.
And God, the creator of man, knows that a man needs a helper. And so right at the beginning of the Bible, he's pairing up a man with a woman.
Yeah.
So.
But even in this whole section, Paul. Well, let me get on to verse 7 and 8, and I'm going to kind of connect the two there. It says, "For I would that all men were even as myself." Paul talking about being single. "But every man hath his proper gift of God, one after this manner, and one after another. I say therefore to the unmarried and widows, it's good for them to abide even as I. But if they can't contain, let them marry, for it's better to marry than to burn." So this whole idea here is that, in the beginning the Lord said, it's not good for man to live alone. So for man in general, he shouldn't be alone. And that's why God created a woman and gave him a helpmeet. But even Paul addressed it here and says, but, people are different.
Yeah.
Every man has his proper gift, and there are some that the Lord may have called to singleness. And there's a blessing
that happens. That happens. I mean, there are people who function fine. And not fine, they're in the Lord's will, and they're doing exactly what the Lord would have them to do, and they are single, and it's totally fine. And there are people who the Lord gives them grace, and they can live a whole life like that. I think of our church in Maryland. You remember it had a pastor many years ago, and I think it was on a Wednesday night. The pastor of the church, long before we went there, actually died in a car accident.
Yes.
And his widow, which was the pastor's wife, when the church got a new pastor, the widow became the secretary of the church.
She stayed on and continued to help the new pastor and the adjustment for the congregation.
So you follow what I'm saying? She was the pastor's wife. Now she's a widow, but she becomes the church's secretary as a young woman now, and lived many years a single woman. She never remarried. She's
still living a single woman, never remarried.
Yeah, but in the Lord's will, totally joyful, with peace about the whole thing, and understanding this was the Lord's, will for her life. And, there's a lot of folks who can live a long life single. They're not falling apart.
They're not doing anything wrong.
Right. They're totally, and I tell you, as long as you live close to the Lord, you can live in any situation. And, well, anyway, I'm sure you have something to say. Go ahead.
No, not particularly. But I will add to that we also know people who've always been single.
Yeah.
Not just who are widowed and single later in life, but we know people, men and women, who have been single their whole life, and now they're in their 40s or 50s, and they're also content in that. The Lord's given them some, and they may not have always been content with that. I mean, I don't know them personally. Well, I mean, we know them personally, but I don't dig into that portion of their personal life.
It's like our church, the not this church, but the last church we belonged to. There's a man in that church, and I think he's still a member there, and we got to be friends. And we would go out on visitation and go around door to door and invite people to church. And it was always him and I. We were always together. And he was about 5, 6, 10, maybe 10 years older than I am. I can't remember how much older he was. But he's older than me, but single, Never been married. Didn't have a girlfriend. I mean, he was a single man. He loved the Lord. He was always in his Bible. He had gone to a Bible college. I mean, he was...
content.
Right, and he is in the Lord's will, and exactly how living the life I believe the Lord had for him or has for him now. And him and I were just different. Me, I needed you, and I still need you, but he apparently is doing good without. But if the Lord has that for him, then that's right.
Hey, welcome to the Trolls. We're so glad to have you here. All right. So yeah, no, it doesn't matter the circumstances. I mean,
I
there's
hope
a
I
lot
explained that right.
You did.
Okay.
There's a lot of different circumstances that could cause a person to be single.
Yeah.
You could be like our young men at the very beginning of your life, and then find yourself single and curious which direction the Lord is going to lead you. You may be midlife and still wondering where it's going, or you may be later in life. There's just a lot of different ways that it could be playing out.
Yeah.
But singleness, there's a lot of different levels to it. And again, like we said, the Bible's clear that it's not good for man to live alone. We don't want anybody to be sinful, and if there's any temptation, marriage is a wonderful, beautiful thing.
Right.
It certainly points to the relationship between Christ and the church, and it definitely has its place. But if one is not choosing to be married, that is perfectly fine too. That is definitely.
Yeah, I guess that's what.
I said it in the broad perspective, Ambi. I didn't mean to put you in the mid category, but.
Well, I guess the point is that you want to be in God's will.
Yes.
And you want to live the life that God would have you to live, period. And if the Lord would have you to be with someone, a spouse, then that's right. If the Lord would have you to be alone for his purpose, his reason, then that's right. Because you're never really alone. You're always with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a case-by-case basis. It's always different.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it's all right if it's in God's will.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say this. The
No, go
next
ahead.
verses that we were going to talk about are connected to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because verses 27 and 28 were the next ones. Again, in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Hello, we're talking about singleness tonight. 1 Corinthians 7, verses 27 and 28, it says, Art thou bound unto a wife? Seek not to be loosed. Art thou loosed from a wife? Seek not a wife. But and if thou marry, thou hast not sinned. If a virgin marries, she hasn't sinned. Nevertheless, such trouble in the flesh, such shall have trouble in the flesh, but I spare you. So it's all of that is good. If you single, be single. If you're married, be married. Both are fine. Everything is good in there. No one is in any kind of sinfulness or wickedness because they choose to be married or be single. The Lord again has made provision for both. Mm-hmm. Okay, so but we're going to actually get into some things for people who are single in a minute, but we just want to emphasize this whole, the whole singleness thing to start out with. So verse 32 is where, 32 through 35, it says, But I would have you without carefulness. I'd have you without worry. He that is unmarried careth for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. And he that is married careth for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife. There's a difference also between a wife and a virgin. An unmarried woman careth for the things of the Lord, how she may be holy both in body and in spirit. But she that is married careth for the things of the world, how she may please her husband. And I speak this for your own profit, not that I might cast a snare upon you, but for that which is comely, and that you may attend upon the Lord without distraction. So again, this is just kind of an encouragement to those who are single. He wants them to not be worried. The benefit of being single, and this is, I think, sometimes people who are single, they worry that they're going to be single forever, and they miss the benefit. They miss the blessing of singleness. And as a married woman, I can see the benefits. You know what I'm saying? I love you.
Yeah.
But I see the benefit of the less worry if you were a single person and it was just you and the Lord.
I'm sure.
That's a benefit.
Yeah, and that makes sense. That makes sense. Marriage can be a wonderful thing.
It can be a wonderful thing.
If both partners are focused on serving God, loving God first, and they can grow closer and closer as they move closer to God. And that's how marriage should be. But the problem is, with contending with our flesh and stuff, that many times that spouse, which should be helping you serve the Lord, sometimes becomes an idol. And sometimes you end up loving your spouse more than you do the Lord. In our world, I mean, many times in our sinful nature, we do that. It's right to love your spouse, but not more than the Lord. And there can be that distraction. So I guess the good thing about being single is, or one of the good things that can be, if the Lord has, if it's His will that you are single, at least for now. You know, you might not be single forever, but let's say for now you are, okay? The benefit to being single is you can be closer to the Lord today. I know that when my family left me for that week, you know, and I had a lot of time. I mean, sometimes
you got a week of singleness.
I did, and I'll tell you, I mean, for a while it was good enough to talk to that deaf cat, but after a while, the cat, it just wasn't cutting it. I mean, Lady's a fine cat, but after a while, she'd fall asleep on me. I'm like, wake up, and she can't hear me. So I thought, well, what do? I tell you, my prayer life got stronger during that week. I had the Lord, and I could talk to Him. My point is that a single person, the distractions are gone, and you can focus on the Lord, and He can have your whole heart, your whole focus, and that's a good thing. There have been many times I've sat in church with my family, and it's good to take your family to church. I think it's right. Every dad, every husband should take his family to church. But sometimes the Lord has it where I sit in service all by myself. And I always know the Lord has something special just for me because He removes my distractions.
I feel the same way.
I'm not focused on my wife. I'm not focused on if the kids are listening, especially when they were little. I was always focused on if they were sitting still, if they were paying attention. When the Lord just takes all distractions away, and I'm sitting there without my family, and I'm just listening to His message from His man, the preacher, the Lord can really speak to my heart because all the distractions would go. You know, interesting to point out, the night I became a Christian, the night I got saved, my whole family was supposed to come with me. And at the last minute, my wife was called into work, so she didn't go. So I had my kids with me. Well, my daughter was a baby. She went to the nursery, so I didn't have her as a distraction. Love her to death, but if I had her, I would have been focused on her. The Lord knew that. He took her out of the picture. So I had my boys, and I had them with me. But the Lord knew that if I had them with me that whole evening, I wouldn't listen to the preaching because I would be focused on if they were sitting still, if they were behaving. So He dismissed them to the children's service. I sat there by myself, and the Lord had my full attention. And everything that preacher preached, I listened. And my point is this, for a single person in this world, if you're focused on the Lord, He has your total attention. You know, you don't have to focus on a spouse. You can focus directly on the Lord. And that can be a blessing. My point is this, you might get married eventually. And if that's the Lord's will, that's a great thing. But today, if you're single, hey, there's no distraction. You can be totally wrapped up in the Lord. And I'll tell you, that's the best. That's the best place to be. Continue on.
I think you made a good point when
Did
you were
I?
talking.
Praise the Lord.
Just specifically when you were talking about how married couples, if marriage is done rightly, it's to honor the Lord and it's for the Lord. If singleness is done rightly, it's done for the Lord and in honoring the Lord. And I think whatever your circumstance, married or single, that needs to be your focus. And I think a lot of times single people are kind of in a waiting stance. They're kind of waiting to get to where they're married so they can start their life. Whereas married people, they're like, they realize that we're married now. we gotta do some things. Although sometimes they're like, maybe when we have children, there's always a waiting thing. And that I think is the mistake that people make, that they put their life on hold. And they don't recognize that the Lord is working in their life right now. In this moment where you're single, this moment where you're married, whatever your circumstance, but we're talking about singleness today. This moment where you're single, the Lord has you in this moment for a reason. Yes. He's not promised you tomorrow. So in this moment, you have to focus on Him and His will and make that your whole focus.
Yeah.
And that is how you're going to have a blessing. Because if you're sitting there waiting, putting the Lord off, of course your singleness isn't a blessing. Of course you're not enjoying it. Of course you're not content because you're focusing on the wrong things.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, especially if you live in this country. I'd say even other countries are just like this. You know, you got like Paris and that, like the place of love and all that kind of stuff. But you know, this world promotes relationships.
They do.
You know, and I know if you're living in
Every
this
movie,
world,
every song.
you listen to all the sappy love songs, watch the sappy movies, you get toward Valentine's Day, and it's, oh, my life's not good because I don't have anybody.
Lonely one.
Instead of letting this world beat you down like you're missing out on something, say, you know, the Lord might have me get married one day, but I don't know him yet. And I'm not going to rush into some bad relationship. I'm just going to enjoy being single until the Lord introduces me to that right person. And I'm going to see this time in my life as an opportunity to get closer to the Lord. So when the Lord does finally pair me up with somebody, I'm exactly what the Lord would have me to be. You know? And I think that's the right thing to do. You let the Lord grow you. So, you know, eventually he can pair you up with somebody and the two of you can serve the Lord together. But the thing is that you don't need a spouse so you can be what the Lord would have you to be. You be who the Lord would have you to be now, and then if it's his will, he'll pair you up. I was just thinking, we have friends in Maryland.
Not discreet at all.
And yeah, I know. The husband, before he met his wife, prayed about who the Lord would have him to marry and wrote a list of who the Lord would have him to marry, right?
He wrote a list of characteristics.
Of characteristics. Yes. That's what I'm saying. What he wanted.
It wasn't like a list of women.
No. Oh, forgive me if that's what it sounded like. No.
It's a list of characteristics.
No. He wrote a list of, yeah, like she said, characteristics, things that he would want in a wife. Okay, let me explain. And you know, like, you know, for example, she loved God and she cared about prayer and Bible reading, and she was godly.
She had lots of specifics. Modest. What she wore, you know, what her hair looked like.
No, listen. Let's boil it down to this. He wanted a godly lady. He just wrote it out, you know, and then he prayed about it. Lord, this is the lady or the kind of lady that I want to meet. Okay, and here's my point. Okay, he wasn't searching for somebody that didn't know the Lord, that wasn't close to the Lord. He wanted somebody who was single, who knew the Lord and was very close to the Lord. My point is this: don't wait to get married to be close to the Lord, to have a fruitful life. Right now, today, you be exactly what the Lord would have you to be. You know. Am I saying it?
You are.
Okay. Go ahead. I feel like you're on the edge.
Well, I see some jokes in here, Bandana Grandma. It says, what if you're single and your mother is offering a dowry of chickens for you? I see you all referencing me. Don't think that I wasn't convicted by this. So there's actually a section that talks...
That's in the Old Testament.
There's a section here in 1 Corinthians 7 that talks to the parents. And it was actually encouraging to me. So it's old-fashioned language, but basically verses 36 through 38, they talk about the father. They said, you know, but if you're a father and you're worried about your daughter and maybe she's getting old and maybe she wants to, older, I should say, and you're wondering about whether or not she'll be married, you know, it's okay. Let her get married if she wants to. But, you know, if you really feel like you should encourage her to stay single, encourage her to be single. Verse 38 says, so he that giveth her in marriage doeth well, but he that giveth her not in marriage doeth better. So, and it's just an encouragement there for parents who are worried about what direction their kids are going. And that was an encouragement to me because I do think I get concerned about that. I think a lot of parents do. I mean, we all know our kids and we want what's best for them.
Oh, yeah.
And we all have ideas of what's best. And that's not necessarily what the Lord's idea of what's best is. So.
Exactly. Because in all seriousness, so every child in this house, every old grown child in this house, and Brianna too, she's still got a few more years, but we want them all married. You know, that's what we want. That's what we desire for them. We don't know if that's the Lord's will. You know, they haven't met that person yet, so we don't know. So we're praying about that, praying for them, that they meet the right person. That's what the Lord would want. But yeah, go ahead. I just jumped in. I'm sorry.
Oh, you didn't know which direction you were. Okay. Well, here, the next thing that we had decided to talk about, because we talked about this, was Okay, so we are parents, and
Yeah.
there are things we're looking for. And I think when the person asked about singleness, I don't know that they really wanted to hear about contentment. For no, Bandana Grandma, they didn't. That's a long story.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I don't think when someone asks about singleness that they really want to hear about contentment. I think they're looking for advice for finding the right person.
I'd say that. We probably talked for I don't know how long now,
25 minutes.
and people are waiting to see. Well, you know,
Are they going to get to it?
they want a checklist on how do I find that person.
But I think it's important to emphasize first that singleness in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's a blessing.
Yeah,
It
I think
really
that's what
is.
we were getting at.
And
I'm fine. I like the statement that I mean, you know, that see it as an opportunity.
yes.
You know, it's not a bad thing. It's not like there's a rain cloud over your head and everybody else is in sunshine.
Yes.
No, if you're in the Lord's will, you're single. I tell you, if you haven't met that right person yet,
Wait.
then you are in the Lord's will.
Yes.
It's not the Lord's will for you to go and marry someone who's not a believer or somebody who is just wrong for you in so many ways. That's not the Lord's will for you to rush a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are single and you haven't met that person, you are in His will. Now you need to see it as an opportunity to grow closer to Him until the day that you do meet said person.
And I think too, just another word of encouragement. We mentioned all these people. If you look around,
Mm-hmm.
you will see if you're in a good church, if you're surrounded by good godly people,
Right.
you're going to see some single people who are single and okay with it. You know,
Yeah.
content, not just
Yeah.
okay, content. You know, pleased to serve the Lord in different, you know, ages, different circumstances. They're
Yeah.
there, and if you pay attention, you'll see them and see how the Lord is working in their life. It's really those who are discontent, who are focused on things that they shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
So what things should they look for? And this, we were trying to think of things we would recommend our own children. If you're looking for someone, before you jump into something, before you go seeking the wrong kind of person,
Mm-hmm.
what are some things you need to look for? And I think the obvious first answer is they've got to be a Christian.
Well, absolutely. In all
Got to
honesty, what is marriage? Marriage is a picture of Christ in the church. It's for the believer. It's a picture of the Lord and His church. So to marry someone who is not a believer, it doesn't even fit. You know, it's not a picture of what marriage is. It is for believers. It's for believers. It's God's idea. He thought it up, and it's a gift to His children. It's not a gift to the world. It's a gift to His children. So yes, first thing you ought to do is find someone who is a believer, and we've dealt with our our own kids and other folks that we've talked to. You know, in this world there are a lot of nice people, kind people, attractive people. It seems like everybody could be a possible option. Not true.
No.
You got all these people in this world, but in reality, as far as Christians go, it's like this many people in this world. This big world, but only this many are Christians.
Mm-hmm.
That's the group. If the Lord's going to give you somebody, it's in that group. It's a believer. He wouldn't pair you up with someone who's not a believer.
I'm going to give you the verse, and you guys know exactly what verse I'm talking about. 2 Corinthians 6, verses 14 to 18.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It says, Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. Don't yoke yourself up with unbelievers.
Mm-hmm.
For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness?
Right.
And what communion hath light with darkness? And what concord hath Christ with Belial? Or what part hath he that believeth with an infidel? And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God, as God hath said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore, come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you, and will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters, saith the Lord Almighty. So, immediately, you can see all of those connections there. What fellowship is this with that? How can you be connected with that person? I know, because I have seen it, and you guys have seen it too, that Christian people meet someone and they think they seem nice,
Mm-hmm.
and they know they're not Christians, and they think to themselves, I'm gonna reach that person for Christ. I'm gonna be a witness to them, and they're really good. They're really nice people, but they don't know the Lord. So I'm going to tell them about the Lord, and I can work with them and change them. That people always say that. We have heard it.
Recipe for disaster. Everybody. I mean, what do I talk about all the time? 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, I talk about witnessing, evangelizing, telling people about the Lord, and that is right. That is my heartbeat. That is what every Christian ought to be doing. But when it comes to marriage, there's a difference between evangelizing somebody and looking for a spouse. Yes, you should evangelize everybody, but you don't go toward a kind-hearted lost person and think, that might be the one God wants me with. That's not... that is, like I said, a recipe for disaster. Because in all honesty, in the verses that you just read, to me, it echoes this in my head. Marriage is not just a union, it's a holy union. It is holy. In God's eyes, it's holy. You become one flesh. It's not just something to do. It's not just a rite of passage. It is a holy union where a holy God pairs up 2 of his children, and they are to live as one and serve him as one. If the Lord gives them children, they are to take those children and together in this holy union raise those children for Jesus Christ. And that is to be holy. Everything about marriage is to be holy. So it is absolutely foolishness to think that you can have God's picture of marriage if you're going maybe for this person and that person and they don't know the Lord. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. So evangelize everybody, but don't think that everybody's on the table as far as it comes to picking a spouse. Like I said, here's the world of all these people in it. But in this world full of people, only this many are Christians. Now here's the point that I want to get at before I forget. In this group of Christians, not all of them are for you. The Lord has one for you in this group. Well, how do you find them? Well, you got to pray and you got to follow the Lord's leading. But understand this, just because a person is saved, that's not good enough either.
Nope.
That's where it starts.
We'll go there next.
You want a believer, yes. But folks, you can be a Christian and be backsliding. You can just live a totally, ungodly existence and be honoring and not the person, not a person you should be with. You want to be with a believer who actually loves the Lord. Yes.
Go ahead.
Obeys the Lord. I mean, someone who's actually walking with the Lord.
Now, before you get to the obedience, because I
want
to hit that. But,
all right.
But just on the actual being a
Cart
Christian
before
thing,
the horse?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize the whole Christian thing.
Yeah.
You need to know that they're a Christian.
Oh, absolutely.
They need to be able to explain it to you in detail.
Well, if you want to stop there for a while, that's a good point. In all honesty, I mean, is this right? I mean, you talk to people, you go to a church and you say, are you a Christian? Everybody says they're a Christian. You can go on your job and everybody says, they're a Christian. Well, I'm not a heathen. I'm a Christian. I celebrate Christmas, that whole kind of thing. No. In this world that we live in, the word Christian, I hate it, but it's true. It has been so watered down. Talk to them and really see if they have a salvation testimony. When did they hear the gospel? When did they realize they were a sinner? When did they realize that Christ was a Savior? When did they repent of their sins, believe in the gospel message, and call on Christ? It's not I think I did when I was 5. No, when did they get saved? If you're not a genuine, blood-washed child of God, mark that person off your list and don't give them another thought. Go ahead.
I want to say, too, that just because, and somebody else mentioned it, I think it was Rosalie, just because they're in church doesn't mean that they are a Christian. Just because their family is a good family and they're in church with you does not mean that they're a good Christian.
Right.
It doesn't make, you need to know their testimony and you need to see some fruit before it's even a consideration.
It's not new with me. You've probably heard it before, but just because, I forget how it goes. Never mind. It was a saying. How is it? just because you go to a garage
Yeah, that's what
in
she
your
was
car
saying.
or something or
Exactly.
other.
That's
I
exactly
don't know
what
how
I
it
think
goes.
Rosalie said.
But I mean, and I used to work with a lady who used to say all the time, Richard, the devil goes to church. That whole thing. And there are a lot of people, believe it or not. I mean, I've actually met them. There are people who are lost who go to church to meet somebody.
Oh, I got a story for that. I got a
because
story.
because they're looking for somebody, and they think good a good girl goes to church, or something, and they go to pick up people. I mean, we were involved in an addictions program. It was church based. It was through a church, and there was a guy in that addictions program. There were people there who were trying to overcome their addictions with the Lord's help. But there was one guy who started going to that addictions program trying to pick up on women. And when that all came out, he was asked not to come back, because I mean he wasn't genuine. He wasn't trying to really grow or go ahead.
I got two stories I want to tell on that. So first
Continue
of all,
on.
I
Get
had a
coffee.
really good friend, and she was in her 30s at the time, and she was attending her church with her family that she had attended for years. And a gentleman came to the church, and he'd been attending for a little while, several months, and then he started to try to talk to her. And she'd seen him around church, and he seemed very faithful, and he was coming. And they didn't know him real well, but it had been a few months, and he started talking to her, and she was really excited because she was in her 30s and she'd been single, and she was like, maybe this is the one. And there was some concern from friends and family that nobody really knew him. And even though everything seemed right on the surface, no one was really sure of his testimony and who he really was. So, thankfully, she had a very active, involved dad, even in her 30s. Her dad loves her and cares for her, and started looking into where the gentleman worked. And the pastor was also close to the dad. And so when he brought up the idea of dating this woman, they didn't just say yes. They said, let me think about it, and went to investigate. And so the first place that they went to investigate was he was an older man. They said, well, let's just pull up, see if he's got a criminal record of any kind. I mean, I think that's kind of, I don't think that's too much. I would be concerned with that if I had a daughter and I didn't know. Say, does this man have a criminal record? Let's go find out. So guess what? They went down and found out if he had a criminal record. Sure enough, he had a few questionable things on there. Nothing too crazy, but they decided to have a peek. So then he worked in a public place. So they decided just to go down and visit his little job and, see him on the job and see if he was faithful in his work and all that stuff. They go to his job. Lo and behold, they find out he doesn't really work there. Now some things are popping off and things are getting really questionable. And they're encouraging the daughter, hold off a little bit. This might not be the gold that seems to be. And she was wise enough to listen to the counsel of her dad and her pastor. And so when she started hearing this, it started taking a step back. Funny thing was, apparently, once they'd gone to check out his criminal record, there had been some kind of warrant that they didn't see immediately. And so the next Sunday they went to church, and the police actually came to the church and arrested the man on a warrant. And when they arrested him, he gave her his cell phone. And he said, can you hold it? I don't know what's going on here. He totally played innocent, handed his cell phone. And she was like, I'll hold it for you. But, of course, she was curious by this time, so she looked on his cell phone, and guess what? He had several ladies he was connected to. It turned out to be a whole big fiasco. He had this whole jail situation, work situation, other ladies, and it was an absolute mess. And if her father and her pastor had not gone to investigate, and they weren't even, honestly, I don't think they really expected to find anything major. They were just trying to be cautious. If they had not gone and looked, she would have found herself in a world of trouble. So that is definitely a problem there. And then the second, you might go help him. The second situation that I had on my mind, I'm trying to remember now. I'm distracted. Ricky's bringing in some bags and boxes. Oh man. Woo! Yep, Mama Jen says, I had a friend who dated a guy who said he was a Christian. He'd fly down and take her to plays, and after they got engaged, one of her friends found out and told her the guy was married. He had everyone fooled, and she was heartbroken. It happens often.
It's sad, but it does.
You have to know who you are talking to. You have to know their testimony for sure. You have to see some fruit.
Yeah, so a good thing to point out.
I have one more. I don't know the
Oh, well, go ahead. But just when you get to that point, you got to take it slow. Really seek the Lord's face in this, and ask Him for wisdom. Ask Him for wisdom, and really take your time at it, because I don't. It just, you don't want to rush into something like this, because once you get into a bad relationship and you actually go through to even marriage or something like that, then you are really in a bad way. You know, so I'll tell you, if it's God's will, it can grow slow, you know. Go ahead. So many people that you meet, you know, they meet somebody, they seem flashy, they seem right, they say the right things. So how many ladies and fellas say, well, this is it.
Yes.
This is God's will for me.
Before they really know.
You know, and I mean, I went to a Bible college. You know, I was the old married guy with kids. And I was in so many classes with all these young boys that were homeschooled who had never been around someone of the opposite sex. And now they're in that Bible college. The guys are surrounded by girls, and the girls are surrounded by guys, and we're supposed to be learning the Bible, but everybody's looking at everybody else and dreaming of everybody else. And I saw it. Just watching, you could see people just running into, you know, things
Relationships.
and just everybody, you know. And I tell you, you're looking for the one.
One.
You know, and you need God's directing and His wisdom. I mean, how in the world can you find that one person in this big world? You need the Lord. Yep. Go ahead.
The other situation that I know of was I was in a church in Maryland, and I had a position within the church that I was supposed to counsel the ladies of the church. And there was a situation where some ladies were fussing with one another, and I was called in to counsel with them and try to help them. And it turned out that there was a man in the church, a man in a position in the church, who was a single man, who had quietly gotten involved with both of these women. Quietly one and quietly the other, and eventually they found out about it, because eventually that's what happens. And they were mad at one another rather than being mad at the man. So we had a conversation, we cleared that up, and then I went and talked to the pastor. And I said, this gentleman who has a leadership position ought not to have a leadership position, because he has caused this difficulty with these ladies. The pastor of that church disagreed with me, felt that the ladies were, and you guys are ladies here, so you'll know what I'm saying, felt that the ladies were at fault, felt that the ladies were over-exaggerating the circumstances, and basically just kind of blew it off. And believe it or not, that I'm sure you can understand, that was the beginning of the end of us being at that church. We left very soon after that. And the end result of that gentleman staying on in leadership was he ended up as a single man convincing the wife of another man in leadership to lead with him. And it caused a big rift in the church, and it was a horrible circumstance. And I wish the pastor had heeded my warning when he did not, because it hurt a lot of people. It hurt a lot of people. But the long and short of it was that that man came in and he was there for a while. He was in leadership. So it doesn't matter if they're in leadership. Doesn't matter. And then so we went to this other church in Maryland, right? That was the one where Rick got saved and we were at for a long time. The same man who caused trouble in that previous church showed up at the new church. And Rick went, that's a whole nother ball of wax. But basically, I was keeping my eye on him. That was the long short. And then he never really stayed around and caused any trouble. But it those things happen. And just because you're in church, just because someone's in leadership, just because they look like they're super spiritual, does not mean that they are what they seem to be. And you need to know. You need to be wholly and completely convinced within yourself of their salvation and that it is genuine. So that's really the whole point of that. You need to know. And if you don't know, back up. Because you do not want to be involved in any of that ugliness. That is the last thing you want to be involved with. And people are sneaking in everywhere. So then the second point is obedience.
I like sitting here when you're passionate.
Oh, I'm passionate about that because I've seen a lot of ladies hurt.
I'll just sit here and be quiet.
We've seen men hurt too.
Oh, yeah.
Men hurt by choosing the wrong ladies. But I think it's actually the opposite with ladies and men. Well, all right, so this is what we've seen with ladies. With ladies, I think a lot of ladies see a man and he looks so spiritual, and they're often convinced to do things that they wouldn't normally do because they think he's just so great. Men, on the other hand, I think are more inclined to see a woman and know that she's not a Christian and really want to help her. That, I think, is what men are more inclined to do, with the exception of married men who end up going off in a illicit relationship. It's usually because they will say, well, that woman is more spiritual than my wife. So that's a whole different ball of wax. But generally speaking, I think it's men try to convince themselves that an unsaved woman could be good. And then women try to convince themselves that a man who seems like he's super spiritual is right, when really he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. That's just what I've seen myself personally the most. Let's see. So, all right, so now down to obedience. So you know the person. You're convinced they're a Christian. Okay? There are a lot of people at this Bible college that you went to. They could tell you the Bible back and forth. They are Christians, but they are young. And they are inexperienced, and they might hit a little rebellious streak. Not the time to get involved with them.
Yep.
Not the time to get involved with them. I'm not saying that the Lord couldn't use them, that you couldn't maybe work, it might be good for you too. Not at that time. You were talking about obedience. Obedience is important.
But listen, it's not obedience because they just have a strong will that they're going to obey. It's obedience due to the fact that God has their heart. There was a guy in Bible college, I remember him. He was very shiny. He wore the white shirt, the necktie. He had the little hair thing. He looked the part.
He looked so
when I knew him in the school, he seemed like he would be a good husband for somebody. I even said to my wife, I said, he looks pretty sharp.
He looks like the kind of boy I'd like for Brianna. I remember him saying that.
We lost touch with him after a few years. Found him on Facebook, and he was doing one of these little back and forth fighting with people on Facebook. His nature had just his sinful nature had just taken over. He was just an ornery little guy now. And the facade that he had was gone. And my point is that you don't want somebody who just knows what to say, and they carry their Bible and they comb their hair real slick and they look the part, and they seem they really obey. The Lord looks past all that, and He looks at the heart. You want somebody who obeys the Lord due to the fact that God truly has their heart. They love God, and they love God so much they will treat you right. Because they love God, therefore they'll love you because they love God. You know, you want them. I tell you this: if they put God first and they truly love Him, they will obey, and they will be the husband that you need or the wife that you need, because God has their heart, and they will do right. You know, it won't be any question, because they are truly obedient. True obedience begins with the heart, is what I'm trying to say. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but that's right. It's a heart thing. It's a heart thing. So here's another thing. Like before you gave your sermon, I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing. Like 10 minutes ago or something or other, I said don't rush into stuff, and that's another reason why you don't want to rush into a relationship. Okay, you want to make sure that their obedience is genuine. That they truly love God, that they have a relationship with God. Okay, just because somebody knows how to talk and they know how to walk doesn't mean that they are in love with Jesus Christ. Go ahead.
Okay.
Well, I knew you had stuff to say.
I didn't, but I will say
I knew
something.
you had stuff. I just figure I gotta say something. You know,
Are you gonna get up and go away?
No,
Every
I'm gonna
time
stay
I
right
talk, you run.
Oh, you know, but I'm parenting.
Oh, are you?
You know, you had the floor, and I was dealing with stuff over there and stuff over there, and every once in a while I say, oh yeah, we're doing a live event, and I'd come sit down.
Good job.
So go ahead, you got it. You got it. I'm co-pilot tonight.
One thing I'll say is that I know a lot of single people, sometimes they get really distressed with the idea that they'll never be married, and so they start worrying about it. You know what I mean? And the thing,
I was worried about it when I was a kid. When I was a teenager.
Let me finish what I say.
There was a time where I thought I'd never get married. I was convinced of it.
So here's the thing. So
then I met you.
Wow. So they worry sometimes that they're not going to get married, and so they want to rush, and the thought of it makes them upset, makes them stressed, and it's just unhappiness. Those of you here who are married, you need to you understand that worse than being single and worried about if you're always going to be single is being married to the wrong person. There's nothing worse than that. You know, there is absolutely nothing worse than being married to someone who is not the right person.
Yeah.
And so you have to, again, this is the idea that you really need to have your focus on the Lord. Because being in a relationship with the wrong person will tear your heart up. Absolutely tear it into pieces. And so you have to have that perspective. You have to remember that. You have to be focused on the Lord and just be content.
It is totally smart, totally wise to focus on the Lord when you're making big decisions like this. Any decision, any small decision, but totally the big decisions as well. I mean, you can look at everything. You know, you should be focused on the Lord when you're deciding what job you're going to have. You should be focused on the Lord when you decide which church you're going to become a member to. You should be focused on the Lord, yes, when you have that spouse. Because, I mean, in all honesty, you know, boyfriend and girlfriend, that's friendship. To get married, that's family. So, I mean, family's a big deal. Family is permanent. Family doesn't go away. So if you're going to have a brand new family member, woo, I'll tell you what, you know, in all seriousness, nobody is smart enough or wise enough by themselves to pick the right one. You need the Lord. You need the Lord's direction. Yeah, I mean, this is a permanent thing. And I'll tell you what, I mean, stop it. But, you know, I mean, I'm not trying to scare anybody, but you don't have to be scared, but you trusting of the Lord, and you should be cautious enough that you want the Lord, you won't put him out in front. Lord, you direct this one. I don't know enough here. You know, there's no way I can pick the right one by myself. You've got to help me. You know, put a big spotlight over this person's head and push me right over there, you know? Because in all seriousness, nobody is smart enough to make that decision. I mean, just because you think you know what you need right now, who's to say you know right now who you need to be with 30, 40, 50 years from now? Crazy. How in the world can you find somebody tonight or today that you should be with 50 years from now? You need the Lord because He's outside of time. He knows what you need 50 years from now. He can pair you up with the person that you need to be with 50 years from now. It's Him. You need His wisdom. So you got to put Him in it, and you got to put Him on the front burner and say, Lord, you direct this thing.
Yeah, I do think we should have probably said that first. We were talking about what to look for. I do think prior to looking, there should be a measure of prayer.
Absolutely.
Deep and thorough measure of prayer. And I know as parents, we have prayed for our children's spouses since they were very young.
Yeah.
We have prayed. And let me tell you something. When there have been people who they have been interested in that we were not fond of, we prayed about that too. We prayed about it. And when they were ones that they did like, we prayed about that. We prayed about it. Because the fact of the matter is, we don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know. Only the Lord knows.
That's true.
And we need to make sure that they get the right one, because we do not want them to go through the years and the toil and the struggle of being with the wrong person. The wrong person. I've told the boys this. I'm going to say it. It's just a fact of the matter, because the boys are old enough now. You know, we've told them before, if you marry the wrong person, okay, she will divorce you. You'll have kids, she'll divorce you.
Especially nowadays.
Yep. She'll go away. She'll run your name through the ringer, put it all over social media. You'll have trouble getting a job. She'll take your kids. You'll have to pay child support. She's going to marry somebody else, probably some horrible man. So this woman is going to run your name through the ringer, make it hard for you to take care of your family, even if you wanted to. She's going to take your children, and some other man, you're going to pay them to raise your children. And you can't do anything about it. You know, the wrong person can ruin your whole life and everything that you intend to do. You know, and it's even worse when I think about the possibilities with Brianna. So it is dangerous. It's and people think they see all these movies, they see, and maybe that's why Satan puts all the movies and the love songs out there and tries to tempt people with this whole idea of marriage and love and all of that it's just like the best thing in the world. And it's really a very serious undertaking. And it needs to be done with sobriety and with thoughtfulness and with carefulness, and not something that one just jumps into because they're just caught up in the emotions of it. There is danger, true danger involved in this kind of decision making, and you have to pause and not jump into anything like that. So,
no, marriage isn't about warm, fuzzy feelings.
It is not.
In all honesty, a marriage, if it's what it should be, there are a lot of feelings involved. And hopefully there's a lot of good feelings. But no, it's not based on feelings at all.
Nope, because those will go away.
It's based on a commitment. And I mean, it's not based, and that's the problem with it. And that's why a lot of folks divorce and have trouble. Because they base everything on feelings. And that's why, and that's one of the reasons why a lost couple many times can't make it. Because they don't know the Lord. There's nothing stronger than themselves keeping them together. You know, the Lord's a force, and He can keep you together. But I tell you, a lost couple, they run on feelings. I know this, that I sometimes, you know, if I'm not careful, I'll run on feelings. You know, today I'm grumpy, tomorrow I'm like totally happy, but then I'm, you know, down again. And you've got to have something that's solid, that's stable. And a lost couple, I tell you, they're up and down like a roller coaster. And you see that all the time. You can go to Walmart, you can go to the mall and see folks shopping who are just having a tantrum, yelling at each other. What causes that? Feelings. They're not always fuzzy. Sometimes they're angry. You know, go ahead.
Mama Jen says you have to see how the other person responds to difficult situations. Rick has always said that whenever Brianna decides to get married, he is going to make the man that she is going to marry mad.
Yeah.
He said he is going, not just him, but his dad too. He said
Yeah.
he's going to make him mad and his dad mad. He's going to go out of his way to make him as furious as humanly possible.
I know.
Because he wants to see
I
if
sound
that
kinda
man...
carnal. But there's some wisdom in that.
he wants to see if that man can control his temper. He wants to see exactly how far he will go if he is pushed far enough before he hands his daughter over to any man. And, you know...
It's easy nowadays. Just talk about politics.
But, you know, people aren't careful about those things.
Yeah.
Melissa says, I feel like people assume that if you're in love, things will just fall into place effortlessly. It's not effortlessly, you know.
What?
And we've said if you're in love, things are just effortless. Because
No.
I love this man dearly.
It's
But there
work.
are days that I
It's
hate
work.
this man's guts. And he hates mine.
Never.
I don't care what he says to y'all. If you're married, you know how it is. And I'm not kidding you.
When I know you're hating me, I just gotta love you more.
There have been times, we've been together 20 years, there have been times that I have really had to seek the Lord because I cannot see how to make it work.
Mm.
It's just a couple of times in 20 years, but there's just been a few times that honestly, we can't work it out. We are so broken, I don't even see how it can be fixed. And every single time it's come to that, I really place it before the Lord. I say, Lord, I can't do this. You have got to mend this because I can't. And he does. He's done it every time. But I'm convinced that every marriage hits points like that.
Many times, I mean, I'll be honest with you, many times I think afterwards we're stronger.
Yes.
You know, I tell you what, if
I'm not talking not like, I'm talking hate.
yeah, but I'm telling you right now, listen to me. I mean, we've gotten to points like that, and when we get over that hurdle,
Yes.
and we're with the Lord, we're actually stronger as a couple every single time. If there's someone listening right now, and you're in a marriage and you're having trouble, don't give up.
Nope.
You know, don't pack up and run. Really seek the Lord. Let the Lord in to the marriage. Like, not just in, not say, well, we have a Christian marriage. No, really let him in. Let him be the center. You know, let him really start to bring you back together.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, it might take a while, but eventually, I guarantee, I think you will be closer and a stronger couple afterwards. Sometimes you really have to be broken in order to get stronger. You know, when you're at your weakest, you know, the Lord can show you how strong He is. So
I appreciate that Melissa said that we've had major ups and downs, and it takes some maturing and realizing that marriage isn't about making ourselves happy. Bandana Grandma, she's been married 50 years. She said, my
Wonderful.
husband and I have been through some of the worst things that can happen in a marriage. So close to divorce, but hanging on to Jesus made all the difference, and we're
Right.
closer and stronger for it. And I think any marriage that's been together for a long enough time, you know, you will hit those times that you get that close. You think, how in the world can we do this? And somehow the Lord works it out. And that's Him and not you. So you've got to have that relationship with the Lord. Your spouse has got to have that relationship with the Lord, or else you can't count on that. There's nothing to count on except the Lord. So this whole idea here is just to show that, you know, marriage in and of itself isn't all of that. It's not feelings. It's hard. And this whole thing that Paul said in 1 Corinthians about how he didn't want people to be worried. He'd rather they were just focused on the Lord. You know, marriage is good. Be married. It's a picture of Christ in the church. There are benefits to it. It's good. But there's so much less worry. There's so much less stress if it's just you and the Lord. And there is a benefit and a joy to being single that you really don't appreciate when you're there. I know that you don't. But if you're looking for someone, you've got to choose wisely. You've got to. So again, I feel like I'm getting off the track.
No,
that
no,
someone
no,
wants
no.
to know what to look for. So, of course, they're a Christian,
Christian,
walking in obedience.
walking in obedience, a genuine obedience,
Yes.
not just something that they put on. You don't want somebody that just puts on a good show. In church, there are people who go who know the vocabulary. They may even know their Bible. They know what to say. They know how to act. You want somebody that actually loves the Lord. And it's so much different than someone who just obeys him. God-fearing, exactly. Somebody who just fears the Lord and loves the Lord so much that they could not help but be a good husband because they just want to be what God would have them to be. They're humble. They're meek. They're gentle. The fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. You should be able to see the fruit of the Spirit in their life. That they have the Lord's joy, that they have the Lord's peace, that they have the Lord's love. The Bible teaches, there's a whole chapter on love. And I tell you what, a person who's walking with the Lord can love godly, a godly love, a love that sacrifices. You don't want to get yoked up with someone who is selfish. If they say I a lot, be careful. If it's always I, me, 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 and it's never the Lord, the Lord, the Lord, having a big alarm, a cautious. If they never talk about the Lord, if they never talk about what the Lord's doing in their life, if I tell you what, if they're not faithful to a church, if they're not busy telling people about the Lord, if they're not busy encouraging Christians, that should be an alarm too. If it's a fella, see how he treats his mother.
And his sisters.
Does he honor his mother and his father? If he cannot, as a son, honor his father and his mother like God would have him to, then don't think he's going to be able to sacrifice and love his wife like God would have him to. How does he treat his mom? How does he treat his dad? Does he give them honor?
Same with the girls, because if you have a son who's looking at girls, I know.
Yeah, exactly.
The boys, years ago. This was years ago. They were much younger, but we were with some families and doing some things, and the father told the daughter to do something, and the daughter looked at the father and said, "Whatever," and stomped off. And my boys, they were discussing it later, and they said, "I don't know about marrying a girl like that," because they were, and she wasn't a possibility. They were much younger, and it was just a conversation. But they were noticing character traits that indicated that she wasn't really, willing to be submissive
A side
in the
note,
best way.
A side note, a rabbit trail, moms and dads, you ought to be putting that into your child's mind
When they're young.
early on, what they should be looking for.
Don't wait till they're teenagers and try to explain it
Exactly. Early on. You don't have to pair them up with somebody. Like, that'd be a good one to marry. Now, don't do that. But teach them early on. You want someone who is saved, who loves the Lord. You want somebody who can love you like the Lord does. You want somebody and put that in their mind and in their hearts what they should be looking for. So as they grow, they know what's right and what's wrong. Go ahead.
Oh, Bandana Grandma, I don't mind at all. You guys can definitely go check out her series on her channel. It's called My Faith Journey, and she talks about her marriage if you want some more information on that. But yeah, you have to look at the family. You have to look at everything because it's all relevant. If whatever, the Bible says, as is the mother, so is the daughter. So if you have a young lady who seems like she's everything on the surface, you have to understand that.
Look at her mother.
I don't mean how she looks.
No. I mean how she looks, how she acts. And I'm thankful.
Her character.
I'm thankful.
Her character.
I've got a wonderful mother-in-law. I love her.
You do.
I love you.
I look just like her.
Yes, you do.
But we're not talking about looks.
Yeah. No, we're not talking about looks.
We're talking
That's
about
not
character.
What I'm thinking.
Whatever the mother's character is, whether the daughter wants to be like her mother or not, it has been bred in her. She
Absolutely.
will be like her mother. Brianna and I are very different, but there are some pieces of me that she cannot escape.
Often she will parent like her mother. She will take care of a husband like her mother did. I mean, you really should look at the family. And it's been said before, and I agree with it. When you marry somebody, you're not just marrying them, you're marrying the whole family. So you should be looking, don't just look at that lady or look at that fella. Look at their parents, look at their siblings, look at even their cousins and everything. Really look at the whole family and think, Lord, is this where you want me? You want me on this family tree? It's important. And many people just don't take it important enough or think of it important enough. I said that wrong, but you know what I mean.
Like on the idea of the parents, like Rick was going to anger not just the man but his father, because even if the man could hold his temper because he has a vested interest in trying to keep his calm in front of Rick because he wants to marry our daughter, it's the idea that if his father loses it, you know that the father's temper has been trained into that boy for many years, and so that's the kind of temper that that young man's going to have later. So all of that. Oh, what? I was looking at Bandy and Grandma's comment. So you really have to take into consideration the family, and
Agreed.
it's rare that you have someone that is completely different from their family. It's going to show up. It's going to show up.
And nobody's perfect, and no family's perfect.
No.
You're not looking for perfection.
But there are major issues you need to be aware of.
You could say it like this: you're looking for somebody perfect for you.
Yes.
In other words, another way of saying that, someone that is God's will for you. Not necessarily perfection, but somebody who is definitely on the right path. You know, they're not perfect, but they are focused on the Lord. And it would be wonderful if the whole family's focused on the Lord. That's what you should be looking for.
So we have their relationship with the Lord, obedience to Him.
Yeah.
And their family.
Yeah.
And character. We've talked about some character things you need to be looking for. Any specific character things that you think are good things to look for, or anything that you think is like a definite no-no? I think certainly on young men, a temper is out of the question.
Yeah. I agree with that. Temper. But I'll tell you what, even ladies.
True.
A lady.
True.
A lady can be something. You know what I mean? And
a temper is out of the question.
Yeah, you should be very careful about temper. And I'll tell you what, they talk about truth and jest. See how they joke. You know, see, are they sarcastic? That might not be good. You know, are they mean?
If they're whole,
Are they honoring?
Mean.
I mean, there's a guy that used to come to our church, and everybody seemed to like him. Everybody, you know, and I had no issue with the fella. But sometimes he would get me to the side, and he was a joke teller. And he would always tell jokes, and he would kind of like poke fun at God. He always had these kind of, you know, God-poking jokes. And I'm just like, you know, I wouldn't tell jokes like that, poking fun at the Lord. And you kind of got to wonder, why is he... There must be something off there if you
that's
know,
his humor.
His humor is poking fun at God. Really listen to the way the person talks. Are they sarcastic? Do they think things are funny that really aren't? Really, because that will give you a clue of what's in their heart. Because you want somebody who has a heart for God.
I'm looking at Mama Jen's comment. The whole thing with temper too is also connected to self-control.
Yes.
Because
that's part of the fruit of the Spirit.
Yes, someone who loses their temper has a self-control problem, and it's going to come out in other areas. It's going to come out, I was going to mention, in finances. It's going to come out in how they take care of their household. It's going to come out in probably in sexual ways and how they relate to people of the opposite sex. So that's a major thing. The self-control thing is a major issue. But Mama Jen says impulsive behavior is another. How they handle money, finances are the number 2 reason for divorce. Definitely how they handle money is a concern. Not because of the money so much, but it tells so much about their character that you can see from how they handle their money whether or not it's going to be a wise decision. And I will also say, too, that when it comes to money, I just had it in my head and I got distracted when I saw Ricky walking by.
When it comes to money, finances.
Let's see.
that they're wise with their finances?
I don't know. Talk about something else. It'll come back to me.
Well, I agree with that. We're talking about self-control. You want somebody who has self-control. So I mean, the whole idea. You know what the husband and the father are supposed to do?
Oh, I know what it is.
They're supposed to die to self. They're supposed to sacrifice for their wife, sacrifice for their. It froze. Are we froze?
I don't know.
Uh-oh. You can hear us, but the picture is frozen. Let us know if you can still hear us, and we will see what's happening here.
That's strange.
You can still hear us, huh?
Look at that attractive couple right there.
All right. Well, we'll finish up real fast.
Yeah, that's so strange.
Since we're frozen, maybe it'll come back. Maybe it won't. I don't know.
Just let it go. Let it go.
If you guys don't mind this beautiful paused picture of us,
Isn't that something?
you can just listen.
Anyway, what I was saying was, I don't even remember what I was saying.
I remembered what
But-
I was going to say if you wanted me to talk about that.
Please.
Okay. What I was going to say was openness, because you want someone who doesn't have secrets. And a lot of times people have secrets when it comes to their money. They won't tell you about how much they owe. That you don't. I've heard of people not finding out until after they're married.
I do look like I'm singing.
Yep. They don't find out till after they're
That
married.
guy's singing well. Go ahead,
Person
I'm sorry.
has like $50,000 in debt, or $100,000 in debt. They need to be open. They need to be honest. They need to be forthright. You don't need to wonder what kind of person they are. They need to lay it on the table and be open and willing to tell you. So that's an important measure for me too. That there's some openness and some kindness within there. And kindness is another important one too. One of the things I loved about Rick, that I have said for years, was how kind he was to people who couldn't reciprocate it. So the elderly, the disabled, babies, animals. Rick was always kind to people, even if they couldn't give anything back to him, and that was rare because when we were teenagers at the time. Most of the other teenagers, when they were dealing with someone who was disabled or elderly, they would mock and be foolish about it. If they acknowledged their presence at all, sometimes they would just completely avoid those people. So Rick was especially kind, and just had someone walk in the door. Rick was especially kind and loving, and I appreciated his kindness to other people. So that's definitely something else I think you need to look for. You got anything else?
No, I've never done a podcast before. Is
That's
that what this is?
Yeah.
No.
Now it's become the Fundamental Faith Podcast.
Yeah. I agree with you. I I think most of the people who are listening probably get it. You want someone who is just genuine. They don't put on the Christian facade. They're not playing church. They're not acting, a part. But they are real. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, if they're not real, don't bother. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people don't guard their feelings. So people talked about feelings earlier. Feelings can control people. Mm-hmm. They're very, before you let your feelings out on somebody, or before you give someone your heart,
give them your heart, yes.
You really need to be careful.
Yes.
You really need to guard it well and guard it, and you should take counsel. If you have a pastor or pastor's wife, your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, friends, you really should ask people that you make the decision, but you should say, do you think that this is good? I mean, do you see something I don't? Mm-hmm. Really ask people who are close to the Lord, their thoughts. Mm-hmm. Because you do want someone genuine, and do not Trust your own eyes. Do not trust your own judgment. Really take time. It's a very important decision.
I'm looking at the comments here. Melissa says, don't ignore red flags. I think that's an important thing to say. Amy says that a friend's dad said he was going to have the man that wants to marry his daughter take the three of them out along with his parents and have him pay. And if he can't afford it, then he isn't right for his daughter. He doesn't have enough money to support the family. Now, I would feel the opposite. I would feel like if he wanted to take a bunch of people out and like have a big meal, I would think he was being ostentatious and that he wasn't wise with his finances. But each family has to decide for themselves what they're looking for. And I think the Lord puts specific wisdom on each parent and on each family that they know some things that are right for us might not be right for other people. And so that's why you need to consult your parents. You need to understand the situation from different perspectives. What are you laughing at? You rather have the money guy?
No. You're just ostentatious. I was thinking, is that good or bad? You're using big
It's
words
like pretentious.
on me.
Like he's trying
I know what you're
trying
saying.
to show off a lot.
I know what you're saying.
But for sure, I think that you need to be cautious. And Amber, you also make another good point that it is certainly it's beyond it's not that it's just okay to be a virgin even if you're a grown adult. You should be. I mean, you should wait for marriage. I mean, that's not even a problem. If you're just coming in for whatever reason, it froze, but we're just going to finish up here real fast.
Yeah, there's an audio and a fine thumbnail to watch.
But anyway, so definitely for sure, while you wait and while you are single, you are continuing to honor the Lord, and you are going to honor the Lord by following his precepts, and one of those is saving yourself for marriage. And it's beyond okay. It's good and it's preferable. And I think
it's right.
When I was growing up,
exactly how you should live.
When I was growing up, we went to public school, and I didn't know anyone who did that. No one. I literally knew no one who waited until they were married to be involved in a sexual relationship. And then when we started getting involved in the church, even when I was young, before I met Rick, I met at this church that Rick and I ended up going to later, a bunch of teenagers who were saving themselves for marriage, and I couldn't believe that still happened in that day and age. And one of the things that directed me to that church is, well, it's frozen here, so it's not going to work there.
Continue.
One of the things that directed me to that church as an adult was I remembered those teenagers who were so different than all the other teenagers that I met in public school, and that they were following the Lord and they were saving themselves for marriage. And so I felt like they must have something really good going on with the Lord, and that was a good church to be at. And so it was not a Catholic church. So when we got older, that's the church we went back to, because I remembered their the way that they lived, and I thought that is exactly what I want for my children. So our children have grown up surrounded by people. Plus, it's a little bit different now because we have homeschool communities, and the whole idea of courting is more well known now. And so they've kind of been surrounded by the idea that you do wait. And so everyone waits, you know. And so we just had a couple of friends that got married a few months ago. She was 27 years old. And when she got married, her father did the wedding ceremony. And he said, when they got married, you may now give my daughter her first kiss. It was beyond not a sexual relationship. They did not even kiss until they got married. And there are so many blessings to that. I think people are in such a rush. I mean, just because you say you're content with singleness, but then you go and behave as though you're not, as though you're dissatisfied with your singleness by being promiscuous, that's false, and it's not fooling yourself, and it's not fooling the Lord, and you end up with a bunch of trouble from it. Go ahead.
Go ahead, what?
Your turn.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Thoughts
on
saving yourself from marriage?
I think the idea is that the world, the lost world, I mean, will look at it like it's old-fashioned.
Yep.
I'd even say some of the Christians that probably go in this contemporary route might think. You know, some of the younger Christians that don't know their Bible or don't really.
Yeah, he's not talking about contemporary music. He's talking
No,
about
I'm talking about folks, you know.
church that's more inclined to worldliness.
You know what I mean. There are a lot of believers out there who are genuine believers. They've trusted the Lord, but they don't read their Bible. They don't really focus on anything, Scripture, I mean. So they still don't know exactly what the Lord expects of them. They kind of live. So, but get away from all this old-fashioned thinking. It is right.
It's not old fashioned or a new thing. It's just right. It's just Bible.
You know, there are some things, and sex is one of them, that the Lord has just put within marriage. Within marriage, it's fine. And within marriage, it's good and honorable. But that's the point, just within marriage. But, you know, the devil knows this, and that's why in our world you see, and it's been not just in our generation, it's been, you know, for thousands of years, since the fall, that whole aspect of marriage has been tainted. It's been corrupted. That's why, you know, you can't get on the internet these days without seeing something. You can't watch TV or turn on anything without seeing something immoral, something wrong. So
We're talking about singleness, Mimi. Yeah, this is, and you are on the tail end of it because we are wrapping it up. So yeah, definitely, this is something that is a challenging topic to talk about in today's world because, like we've talked about, all music, all movies, they want to talk about love, but they don't just talk about love. They talk about sex. And Shania hit it right on the mark. The flesh is easily tempted, and I think that's why Satan is directing us in the world to things that are going to be tempting, so that we can cross lines and do the things that get us away from the Lord. But we just have to definitely keep our minds on serving the Lord and keep our bodies serving the Lord. And again, you're going to find the right person at the right time. And all you just have to do is keep your mind on the Lord, and He will direct you. So, you want to go ahead and wrap it up? I feel so bad everybody's looking at you singing and me pondering.
Oh, that's a fine picture. That's a fine picture. Yeah, I know. That's what they'll remember. No, I think we've said quite a bit tonight. I tell you, if we've said anything that has brought up some questions or anything, feel free, you know, afterwards to leave them in the comments, and we'll get back to you, or maybe it'll become part of next week's Q&A. Because it is really a big topic. When we discussed at the beginning of this, you know, advice for singles, you know, I knew it was going to be a big topic. There's a lot that goes into it. You know, when I was in Bible college, there's an entire course that is dedicated to the Christian home. There's a lot that goes into it. It's a big decision, and it's really more than you can talk about with just one Q&A. Really, if there's somebody who is considering getting married or something, it should be a lot of counseling involved. You know, marriage counseling, you should get with a pastor. You should really, you know, get a good view of what marriage is before you enter into it. A biblical view of marriage. So there's a lot that goes into it, and by no means do I think we've talked about everything tonight. But at least maybe maybe the Lord used something that was said tonight through His Scripture, through what we said, to get somebody's mind going. You know, help somebody connect some dots. But I think it was a good Q&A, even though it's frozen.
Well, it's just been the last 10 minutes or so. So we want to thank you all for hanging out with us tonight, and we hope it's been helpful to you.
Yep.
And like Rick said, next week, if you have any other questions, let us know. But that's about all that we have for tonight. Do you want to close in a word of prayer?
I will. Lord, thank you for tonight, and thank you for your word. And Lord, thank you for salvation. Thank you that I heard the gospel and got saved, and I just thank you for that. Lord, if there's someone listening right now, and they've listened all night about singles and getting married, but they don't know you as Savior, I pray that would be the first decision that they make, that they would trust you as Lord and Savior, that they would get saved, have their sins forgiven. They'd put all their faith, hope, and trust in Christ and Christ alone. I pray for someone to get saved tonight. And then I pray for folks that are seeking a spouse, looking around, wondering who they should marry. I pray that you would direct them to the right person. Someone that loves you and follows you. I pray that you would pair them up with such a person. If there's someone listening tonight and they're in a marriage, but they're having trouble, I pray that you would help. I pray that you would show yourself strong in that marriage. And I pray that you would help both folks in that marriage learn to love you above all. And I pray that you would mend fences and help broken hearts move on. I pray that you would bless a marriage tonight. And Lord, I just pray that you would bless everyone listening. Anyone who is sick or not feeling well, anybody with unspokens tonight, I pray that you would just let everyone know, special tonight, that you love them, that you would work in their hearts and their situations and help everybody to just keep their eyes on you, knowing that there's a home in heaven and that you care about us here. Thank you, Lord, for being patient with us and for loving us. And I pray all this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. All right, everyone. Thanks again for hanging out with us. And
Yes.
we'll see you, Lord willing, next Wednesday.
Maybe we'll have a visual
Next Thursday.
next Thursday.
I said Wednesday. Thursday. We'll see you guys then.
Bye. Good night. Thank you for
Bye.
joining in and staying around even when it froze.